Chapter 13 Lord Gryffindor and the Wolf Maiden. The cold wind blew hard across the northern woods as silence fell around the mill. The snow whispered beneath Harry's boots as he stood alone before the Bolton men, 4 soldiers in boiled leather and mail, swords drawn, eyes wary. Behind them, Lord Roose Bolton stood motionless in the back, watching with unreadable eyes. Harry held the sword of Gryffindor loosely in one hand, its ruby-studded hilt gleaming in the moonlight, its blade shimmering with a faint, wicked sheen. He remembered it all too well, the bite of the basilisk, the rush of venom on the fang, and how he drove that fang through the mouth of the beast. The sword had drunk deep that day, had absorbed poison no healer could cure. A single cut, Harry thought grimly, and they'd be dead within minutes. But he didn't want that. These men weren't monsters. They weren't Death Eaters. They weren't even the cruel sort. They were small folk raised to be soldiers, servants of the Boltons. They were following orders. That didn't make them blameless, but it didn't make them deserving of death, either. So Harry let the first sword strike come, and he blocked it cleanly, sparks flaring where steel met magic. Then he pivoted, ducked under the second man's swing, and drove his fist into the soldier's ribs with a bone-jarring crack. The man fell, wheezing, clutching his side. The third soldier came in fast. Harry spun low and swept his leg beneath the man's stance. The soldier dropped like a felled tree. Another blade came for his shoulder. Harry twisted and stepped close, too close for the sword to matter, and struck the attacker with an open palm blow to the chest that sent him sprawling back into the snow. Punch after punch, kick after kick, no magic, no swordplay, just raw, honed instinct, reflexes sharpened by fighting Death Eaters, training with Sirius and Moody, fighting a war before he turned 17. One soldier tried to rise again. Harry didn't hesitate. He turned and elbowed the man in the temple. He went down and didn't get back up. All 4 men lay groaning in the snow, bruised, bloodied, but alive. A sharp gasp came from the porch of the mill. Oliver and Beth, hand in hand, stared in disbelief. Harry slowly turned his eyes to the only man remaining, and now he is on horseback. Roose Bolton, the Lord of the Dreadfort, looked down at his fallen soldiers, his thin mouth trembling at the corners. His pale eyes darted from Harry to the sword of Gryffindor, and in a single, pitiful motion, he spun his horse around and kicked it hard. Coward, Harry murmured, but he was already moving. With speed no knight could match, he lunged forward and caught the reins, and with his other hand, grabbed Bolton's wrist and pulled. Roose screamed as he tumbled off the saddle, hitting the frozen ground with a crunch and a low groan. His cloak sprawled around him, his ornate boots flailing. Harry stood over him, eyes cold. "You came here to ruin a wedding," Harry said. "You came to hurt an innocent woman. Now don't beg for salvation." Roose grunted, his hand reaching for the dagger at his belt. Harry kicked it aside, then he knelt, one hand still holding the sword, the other pressing against Bolton's chest. "Let's see," Harry said quietly, "what kind of man you really are." And he looked into Roose Bolton's eyes. Legitimacy flowed. The world blurred, and Harry saw. He saw a younger Bolton, face pale and emotionless, ordering a man's wife taken to his bed as punishment for a late harvest. He saw servants flayed for disobedience. A boy hang for hunting a hare without permission. He saw women screaming behind locked doors. Children crying. Fields salted. Crops burned to teach lessons. Bolton didn't feel guilt. He didn't feel anything. He enjoyed it. The cold, surgical delight of inflicting pain. When Harry withdrew, his face was set like stone. Roose opened his mouth to speak, but Harry gave him no chance. "I've seen enough." The sword of Gryffindor pierced cleanly through Roose Bolton's chest. The man choked once, blood on his lips, and then fell still. Harry stood in silence, breathing heavily, the sword dripping crimson into the snow. Behind him, Beth gasped. Oliver stepped forward, face pale. You killed him." Harry turned slowly. "I did." Doran came running from the path, breathless. "I saw riders from the woods." "Are you all?" He stopped when he saw the corpse. "Gods." Harry wiped the blade on Bolton's cloak and sheathed it. "You need to run," Doran said quickly. "Now, you don't know what you've done, Harry. You killed a lord. The North won't care why. They won't care about the truth. The Starks won't have a choice, they'll have to hunt you down for justice." Oliver nodded, grabbing Harry's arm. "They'll send riders, maybe even bannermen. You'll be declared a criminal." Harry looked down at the body. He was no lord. He was a monster. "I know," Doran said. "We all know. But the law." "I understand." Harry turned toward the forest. The night was still dark, the snow undisturbed. He summoned his horse from the enchanted pouch and mounted swiftly. He turned back to Oliver and Beth, who stood close together, wide-eyed. "I'm sorry," Harry said, "for all of it, but no one will hurt any of you. As long as I breathe." Beth nodded silently, eyes glistening. Doran stepped forward. "You'll always have friends here, Harry. But you need to go." Harry clicked his tongue and spurred the horse forward, galloping into the woods as snowflakes drifted down like falling ash. Above, circling silently, was winter. The white dragon screeched once, low and long, before vanishing into the clouds. And Harry, the so-called Lord Gryffindor, disappeared into the north once more, leaving behind a mill, a wedding, a grave in the snow, and a legend that would spread across the lands before dawn. The wind howled across the icy plains of the north like a wounded beast. Snow fell in heavy, silent curtains as Lyanna Stark rode slowly through the storm, her hood drawn low and her furs wrapped tight. Her horse, a sturdy gray mare named Cinder, struggled through the deepening snow with heavy steps. Lyanna patted her neck gently. "I know, girl, just a little farther," she whispered, her breath fogging the air. "We're both freezing." She had ridden through the night since fleeing Winterfell, but even her Stark blood could not ignore the cold much longer. Her fingers ached despite the gloves, her face was red and raw, and Cinder's legs trembled with exhaustion. She needed shelter, and she knew exactly where to go. Tumbledown Tower, a crumbling ruin off the King's Road, half forgotten, half swallowed by the forest. It had served her family once before, during a short stop on their way to execute a deserter of the Night's Watch. Travelers and hunters still used it now and then, especially in winters like this. If the gods were kind, it would be abandoned. They were. The tower appeared through the mist like a ghost, its jagged silhouette rising against the sky. Stones lay scattered around it like the broken teeth of a dead giant. No smoke, no sounds, no movement. Lyanna led Cinder into the ruin's shadow with a sigh of relief. Inside, the tower's bones still held, walls that leaned but stood, and a section of ceiling that kept the snow at bay. She tied Cinder in the driest corner and rubbed her muzzle, whispering thanks. Then she moved to the hidden alcove behind the collapsed wall. As she hoped, a small stack of firewood still lay there, dry, wrapped in an old tarp. She set about making a fire with shaking hands, striking the flint like her brothers had taught her. Sparks flew, flames caught, warmth spread. She sat down, wrapped in furs, and finally breathed. The meat pie she stole from the Winterfell kitchens was cold, but edible. She chewed slowly, staring into the fire. Thoughts came unbidden. Rhaegar, his voice, his songs, the look in his eyes when he called her, "my silver wolf." The promises of escape and freedom. Her fingers drifted to her stomach. The secret growing inside her. Her father's face rose next, stern, proud, perhaps even heartbroken when he read her note. He would search for her. Brandon, too, even Eddard, from the Vale. All for nothing. She wasn't going south to meet her lover. She wasn't even certain where she was going. Just away. The fire crackled, and exhaustion overtook her. She curled up on the stone floor, cocooned in her cloaks, and drifted into uneasy sleep. The scream shattered her dreams. Lyanna jolted upright, heart pounding. Her hand flew to the dagger at her belt, but it was already too late. The tower was no longer empty. Figures loomed all around her, crouched and growling like wolves. Feral eyes, matted hair, yellowed teeth. Wildlings, at least 10 of them. The fire she built now roared, and beside it, Cinder. Her horse lay dead, her throat slit. The wildlings had already begun butchering her, cutting thick slabs of meat and throwing them over the fire. "That's her awake," one of them rasped, pointing with a bloody knife. "Pretty thing." A man stepped forward, tall and thin with a face like leather and only 3 teeth to his name. He grinned at her with a crooked smile. "Well now," he said, "ain't you a gift from the gods?" Another snorted nearby, drunk off stolen wine. Around them lay crates of supplies, furs, food, even blades marked with castle sigils. Plundered goods, weapons of noblemen. They had raided someone's caravan, and they were still celebrating. Lyanna stared in horror, her voice caught in her throat. The thin man knelt beside her and sniffed. Southron perfume, he mused. Clean hands, lashes like a lady. He reached for her face. "What's a fine thing like you doin' out here all alone?" Lyanna jerked her head away. "Don't touch me." "Oh ho." Another wildling laughed. "She bites." We'll see how long that lasts, said a squat man by the fire. The lad who found her says she came from the road. Maybe she's runnin', maybe a runaway noble girl, Then she don't belong to anyone, said the first man, his grin returning. And that means she's fair game. No, 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 Lyanna backed against the tower wall, her hand still on her dagger. The wildlings were drunk and loud. They passed around bottles, laughed, argued. But the laughter was changing, turning ugly. Who gets her first? Someone slurred. She woke in my watch. Shut your crooked teeth, Drog. She looked at me. That means she wants me. Lyanna's stomach turned to ice. No, she said aloud, louder this time. You're not touching me. They laughed again, but something in her voice made the closest man hesitate. Just a flicker. I'm warning you, she said, drawing her dagger. Her hands trembled. I'm not afraid to kill. The toothless man leaned in close, face inches from hers. Oh, I don't mind a little fightin'. Makes it more fun. Lyanna slashed. The dagger cut his cheek. He roared and fell back. You little whore, he shouted. The tension in the ruined tower hung thick as the flames crackled, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. Lyanna's breath was shallow, her eyes darting between the filthy faces that circled her like wolves around a wounded doe. Her dagger still trembled in her hand, but the numbers were against her. Then, the sound of hooves. A sharp rhythm of iron against stone echoed from the direction of the broken archway that once served as the tower's entrance. The wildlings stiffened, hands drifting toward stolen weapons. One of them spat into the fire and snarled. What now? A lone rider emerged from the swirling snow, cloaked in heavy furs, the hood pulled deep over his face. His horse, white with ice dusted across its mane, snorted and stomped the frozen earth. Greetings, strangers, came a voice from beneath the hood, calm, smooth, and unhurried. I am a fellow traveler myself, and the night is far too cold to ride further. I see you have warmth. Might I join your fire? The wildlings exchanged glances, confused. The man's tone held no fear, no urgency, and he had no blade drawn. The leader of the wildlings, Drog, the one with the toothless grin, stepped forward with narrowed eyes. You must be mad, rider. This land ain't for highborns playin' at adventure. The man dismounted without comment, brushing snow off his shoulders with a deliberate grace. His boots crunched across the stone floor as he approached the fire, cloak shifting with each step. Beneath the furs, one could just make out fine black boots, a deep red tunic, and the glint of a silver fastener. He looked like a lord. Lyanna's eyes widened in alarm. No, don't come closer, she cried. These men are wildlings. They'll kill you. The stranger paused. His head tilted slightly as he turned to face her. For the first time, Lyanna could see his face clearly, youthful, sharp-jawed, with a quiet intelligence behind his green eyes. He blinked at her. Wildlings, he repeated. Even the wildlings gaped at him now. You don't know who we are. One of them growled. Harry frowned. I thought you were fellow travelers, hungry ones, by the smell of roasted horse. But I suppose I should ask, what is a wildling? The tower went silent. Chapter 14 Beyond the Wall, the Gryffindor and the Silver Wolf. Snow whispered against the collapsed roof and spiraled into the open ruins like ghostly breath. Harry sat cross-legged beside the fading flames, his cloak wrapped tight around his shoulders, eyes still flickering with thoughts. Lyanna Stark sat across from him, wrapped in a fur blanket, her face pale from cold and fear, yet her eyes burned with stubborn defiance. Around them, the wildlings lounged like wolves after a fresh kill, picking meat off the remains of her horse, sharpening stolen weapons, or swigging stolen wine. Harry's gaze drifted from the toothless man who had grabbed Lyanna earlier to the others, men and women hardened by frostbite, famine, and exile. Then something clicked. So, when you called them wildlings, Harry said slowly, turning back to Lyanna, you mean the ones the Night's Watch guards against? The ones beyond the wall. Lyanna stared at him, perplexed. Of course, who else? Harry blinked in confusion. I thought they were monsters. Creatures. Something inhuman. But they're just people. People like you and me. At this, all eyes turned toward Harry. Lyanna's, the wildlings, even the old man sharpening a sword in the corner raised an eyebrow. Lyanna's voice was cold with disbelief. You really know nothing of the North. Apparently not, Harry admitted. He gestured toward the group. They're dangerous, yes, but they're hungry, hunted. I get it now. They can't grow food in those frozen lands, can't trade. So, they raid. What other choice do they have? One of the older wildlings, a bearded man with braided gray hair and a scar down his face, grunted. At least one kneeler gets it. Harry tilted his head. How did you get here, though? Aren't there soldiers on the wall to stop you? The old man nodded. Some of us crossed the sea in small boats. Others scaled the wall. Like spiders. Like fools. Lost 2 men on the way down. Harry's eyes lit with admiration. That's impressive. Risky, but impressive. One of the younger wildlings, tall and angry-eyed, spat to the side. Enough chatter. Let's kill the kneeler and take the girl. He eyed Lyanna hungrily. Claim her properly, like warriors. Lyanna recoiled, her face twisting in disgust. Harry raised his hand gently, palm open in a gesture of peace. You don't have to kill me. I'm not like the others from the north. The leader frowned. Why not? Harry shrugged. Because they'll be hunting me soon, too, and I would like to come with you to the land beyond the wall. A ripple of interest passed through the wildlings. Lyanna looked up, startled. Why would they hunt you? The bearded one asked. Harry exhaled slowly, staring into the fire. Because I killed someone. Silence. Who? The tall wildling asked warily. Lord Bolton. Lyanna gasped audibly, clutching her cloak tighter. The entire room burst into noise. Some cheered, others barked laughter. The old scarred wildling gave a hoarse cackle. You killed Bolton. Ha, that flayed bastard had it coming. Another growled. Skinned my cousin alive for stealing a sheep. May his corpse rot in the snow. Drank wine from a skull, I heard, said another. Serves him right. Harry merely nodded, watching the sparks rise from the fire like fleeting spirits. Then one of the wildlings pointed at Lyanna. But what about her? We can't let her go. She's a noble. If we let her live, she'll bring the wolves down on us. Harry looked up, calm as ever. Then make it fair. A contest. Your way. Let her fate be decided by strength and skill. Several wildlings muttered in agreement. Another added, Aye, the old way. Jarl stood. Then an axe-throwing contest. They liked that. Axes were drawn, targets were arranged. A blackened plank of old oak hung on the far wall, marked with a rough red X in blood. Each man who desired to claim the girl took their place in line. Harry was the last. They began one by one, hurling heavy iron axes into the board. Some stuck near the center, others thudded into the walls. Lyanna watched, stone-faced, gripping her blanket tightly. Then came Harry's turn. He stepped forward, calm and composed. His axe gleamed under the light of the firepit. With a small flick of his finger, barely noticeable, he whispered, impervious, under his breath. A tiny enchantment to guide the axe true. He threw. The axe split the center of the X cleanly in two. A perfect throw. A silence fell. Then cheers erupted. The kneeler wins, someone called. Never seen a throw like that. He wins the girl. Harry turned to Lyanna and offered a faint smile. Come with me. He stepped forward and handed her the reins of his horse. Go, ride to the road. Lyanna stared at him. You won. They'll let you have me. I didn't want to win you, Harry said quietly. I wanted to save you. She looked at the horse, then back at him. I can't go back, she whispered. I ran away. I'll bring shame to my family. I'm not married and carrying a child. Harry's expression softened. Then come with me. To the lands beyond the wall? She asked, searching his face. He nodded. You'll be safe there. A long pause. Then Lyanna nodded slowly. All right, let's go. The wildlings, for once, made no protest. They were already starting to pack their things, preparing to move again. She's with you now, the old scarred one said to Harry. She's one of us. And with that, Lyanna Stark, once promised to a future queen of the South, once betrothed to the warden of the Stormlands, left behind her name, her titles, and her fear, riding with a stranger cloaked in firelight, toward the cold unknown. For nearly a week, they traveled like shadows through the deep pine forests and snowbound hills. The wildlings, skilled in the ways of secrecy and survival, led the group west at first, away from the well-patrolled King's Road. Then, they turned northward, skirting through frozen river valleys and the narrow mountain passes where the mountain clans of the north had long since made peace with silence and solitude. The terrain grew harsher with every league, but the wildlings were sure of their path. They knew the caves that no map recorded, the hunting grounds that bore meat even in winter, and the hidden streams that ran cold but clean. When the moon rose, they walked. When the sun broke through the clouds, they slept. Sometimes in the open under firs, other times in old, crumbling keeps of forgotten men, or in hollowed rock shelters veiled by snow. And always, Harry watched the skies, knowing that above, his dragon followed. Winter was never far. Invisible to the eyes of men, the great white beast flew higher than hawks, his scales blending into the clouds, his presence no more than a gust of wind or a flicker of shadow over the tree canopy. When they slept, Winter curled atop distant cliffs or in snowy clearings, silent and watchful. Despite the hardships, there was laughter. Harry had a way with people, and even wildlings weren't immune to his charm. He told them stories, not just of his homeland or foreign wars, but tales of impossible castles, talking portraits, flying brooms, and magical beasts that roamed unseen lands. At first, they thought he was mad. Then, they listened more. And then they laughed. Sometimes they demanded a story before setting up camp or made him swear to continue the tale the next night. In their world of ice and blood, Harry's voice became a light. Lyanna Stark often walked beside him, wrapped in a fur cloak, her long black hair braided in wildling fashion, her gray eyes no longer cold but curious. One evening, as they camped in a high mountain cave that looked down upon the distant frost-covered pines, she leaned closer to him near the fire. "You never told me," she said, her voice quiet but not cold. "Why did you kill Roose Bolton?" Harry stirred the embers with a stick before answering. "Because he was about to rape a woman. My friend's wife. Said it was some ancient custom, first night, rites." He spat the words with disgust. He thought being a lord gave him the right to take what wasn't his. "So, I killed him." Lyanna stared into the flames, silent for a long time. "Then you did the right thing," she said finally. "Not many men would risk death for a small folk's dignity." Harry looked at her. "What about you? Why did you run?" She took a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around the fur at her shoulders. "Because I was betrothed to a man I could never love. Robert Baratheon. My father arranged it. My brother approved. But they didn't know him like I did. He drinks, fights, beds whores, and then smiles like it's all a game." Harry listened, nodding gently. Lyanna continued, her voice trembling with memory. "Then I met him, Rhaegar Targaryen. The prince. He crowned me at the tourney of Harrenhal. Queen of love and beauty. Not Elia, me." She smiled bitterly. "We met in secret, made plans for a life away from court. Away from Robert. But after he returned to King's Landing to claim his throne, he stopped sending letters. Stopped everything." Harry frowned. "You think he abandoned you?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe he was caught. Maybe I was just an escape for him. But I can't go back. Not with a child growing inside me. I won't bring shame to my house. I won't let my son grow up in chains." Harry placed a hand over hers. "Then he won't." They said nothing more after that, just sat quietly beside the fire until it died to coals. On the seventh morning, the trees began to thin, and the cold wind carried a scent Harry had almost forgotten, salt. They came upon a long cliffside trail and, from its edge, the world opened to a frozen sea below. At the base of a jagged cliff, hidden by an overhang and thick sea mist, lay the mouth of a sea cave, dark and yawning like the mouth of an old god. They descended the switchbacks carefully, helping each other down slippery rock and icy ledges. The roar of the surf grew louder until it echoed off the stone around them. The cave itself was vast, its interior lined with crates, barrels, bundled furs, and weapons wrapped in oilcloth. "Loot from our last raid," said one wildling proudly. "Axewood and Bear Island both. A good season." Harry raised his brow. "How did you get all this down here?" "Carried it in piece by piece," said another. "And now it's time to take it home." 4 boats waited at the back of the cave, pulled half out of the water and covered in tarps. The wildlings wasted no time. They hauled the boats to the surf, loaded the supplies, and tested the oars. Harry stood with Lyanna beside the waves, the wind tugging at her cloak, her face pale but steady. "Once we cross," she said, "there's no coming back, is there?" Harry looked out over the gray, endless water. "Only if we want to." She nodded, her voice soft. "Then let's go." They boarded separate boats, 8 people to each vessel, and shoved off from the icy shore. The water was frigid, the sky full of clouds, and the sea swelled angrily beneath them. But above them, high above the clouds, winter circled like a ghost. No words were needed. Harry could feel his dragon through their bond. Winter would follow, guarding from the sky. Together, they rode toward the lands beyond lords and laws, where the free folk ruled themselves and no oaths bound the will of men and women. Lyanna Stark and Harry Gryffindor had left the world of politics and noble houses behind, for now. But fate had not left them behind. Not yet. Chapter 15 Ice Raven's Refuge, the North Beyond the Wall. The sea was merciful that morning. Its glassy surface rippled gently beneath the hulls of the 4 wildling boats, the tide rolling slow and steady like a sleeping beast. The sky above was cloud-draped but quiet, and the air smelled sharp with salt. No waves, no wind, no storm on the horizon. It was as if the ocean itself had consented to their passage. The boats, crude but sturdy, had no sails. Wildlings had no use for them. They were oar-powered, long and narrow, made for speed and stealth, not war. In each boat, oars dipped and pulled, in an uneven but determined rhythm. Harry sat beside Lyanna Stark in the second boat, glancing at her pale face as she leaned forward, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "You're seasick," he said gently, pulling one of the oars from a nearby wildling who gave it up without complaint. "I don't know if it's the sea," she muttered, "or the child." Her face flushed as she added, "or both." Harry gave her a sympathetic look. "Rest. We've got this." Lyanna nodded and closed her eyes, leaning back against the bundled furs behind her. Her breath came slow and shallow as she tried to will the nausea away. The wildlings, meanwhile, had no intention of suffering in silence. One of them, a thick-shouldered man with a braided beard and a ragged wolfskin across his back, threw his head back and howled a raunchy tune into the sky. "Oh my wife, she's waitin' with a belly and a blade. Hair like hay and teeth like stone, gods of mist that made. She'll beat me when she sees me, then she'll drag me to the bed. Where I'll show her how I missed her, till the straw is red." The others burst into laughter, slapping the sides of the boat with their oars in a thudding rhythm. "Oi, that's your wife you're talking about, Ogar," one of the men in the next boat shouted across the water. Ogar grinned, showing more missing teeth than whole ones. "Aye, and she's got the strength of a bear and the appetite of 3. I hope she's still waitin'." Their singing resumed, more like howling than melody, full of vulgar verses, crude laughter, and chest-thumping bravado. But behind the jest, Harry could sense it, longing. Desperation. These weren't just songs. They were prayers hidden behind dirty jokes. Harry pulled steadily on the oar, matching the rhythm set by the others. It was hard work, but the singing made it easier. "Your turn, Kneeler," someone yelled from the lead boat. Harry raised his voice, loud enough for all 4 boats to hear. "There once was a man from down in the vale, who wooed a fair lass with a fish in a pail. He lost the damn fish, but she didn't much care, for he'd hidden a trout in his breeches right there." Laughter echoed across the water. Even Lyanna cracked a smile before covering her mouth to stifle another round of retching. "She's not used to sea travel," Harry explained to a nearby oarsman. "Or wildling food." At that, a small piece of blackened meat was tossed into his lap. "Best she start. Tonight it's horse again." Harry held the piece up and gave Lyanna a questioning look. She turned her head away. "It was my horse." "I know." He said it aside without comment. He would feed her something better later, maybe some dried pears or honeyed bread from his magical trunk. The trunk sat hidden in his coat pocket, magically shrunk. No one knew about it, and Harry had been careful to ensure that its nature remained a secret. The wildlings were not evil, but desperation made men covetous. Even friends. Lyanna stirred later that afternoon and asked to try rowing. She managed half a dozen strokes before groaning in frustration and handing the oar back. "I can ride a horse through a blizzard and split an arrow with my own, but this is torture." Harry grinned. "It takes time." "I don't have time," she said under her breath, resting her hand on her belly. The sun had begun its slow descent when Harry leaned toward her, curiosity in his eyes. "Tell me about your family," he said. She blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" "Because I've met lords and ladies, but never a Stark. And I like to know things." Lyanna sighed and looked out over the water, her fingers tightening around the boat's edge. "There's not much to say. My father, Lord Rickard Stark, is a hard man. Not cruel, but distant. He never remarried after my mother died. He always said the North doesn't need more songs, it needs strong roots." "Sounds like a Stark thing to say." She smiled faintly. "It is. My eldest brother, Brandon, was the wildfire in our house, brave, reckless, stubborn. He was married to Caitlin Tully." She stopped herself. Harry nodded solemnly. "Then there's Eddard. We called him Ned. He's quiet, thoughtful. I think he would have made a better maester than a lord, but he bears the Stark name with pride." Do you look like him? She laughed, genuinely now. No, Ned looks like our father. I look like our mother. Or so I've been told. I was the unruly one, the daughter who climbed trees, threw snowballs at squires, and snuck into the kennels to play with the wolf pups. There is also Benjen, my younger brother, and I miss him already. Doesn't sound like a bad family to me. It wasn't, not until I was told I'd be married off to Robert. She spat the name like it tasted sour. The boats glided forward, oars cutting the calm sea. The Bear Island patrols hadn't seen them, or if they had, they hadn't bothered to interfere. That suited Harry just fine. By dusk, the clouds burned orange along the western horizon. The men grew quieter, the singing faded, and even the tapping of oars slowed as muscles tired and voices faded. Harry glanced skyward once more. Winter was up there, he could feel it in his chest. A steady presence, a protective force. No words were needed between them. The bond was enough. As Lyanna finally curled beneath a fur cloak and fell into a restless sleep beside him, Harry kept rowing, his arms aching but his resolve firm. They were heading toward freedom. But freedom, Harry knew, was never free. It was early morning when the horizon began to shift. A distant glimmer broke through the lingering mist. A white peak, jagged and glorious, pierced the pale blue sky. The wildlings saw it first. The tallest among them pointed and shouted, "Home!" The others took up the call, and soon the boats surged forward with renewed vigor. The oars dipped faster into the still sea, spurred on by the sight of snow-covered mountains rising like frozen sentinels above the bay. Harry leaned forward, his breath catching as the land came into full view. The beauty was raw and brutal, steep cliffs draped in frost, waterfalls frozen mid-cascade, and a jagged coastline dotted with black stones and thick pine forests. But it wasn't the mountains that drew their focus. It was the narrowing inlet they were rowing into, a bay shaped like a wide triangle, its mouth yawning before gradually tapering into a slender, winding fjord. Towering cliffs stood on either side like walls, and the echo of their oars splashing against water bounced off the stone. There was a haunting quietness here, broken only by the occasional cry of sea birds and the creak of wooden boats. As the passage narrowed, Harry stood, straining his eyes ahead. "There," he whispered to Lyanna, nudging her gently awake. She stirred, blinking the sleep from her eyes. "What is it?" "Look." And then she saw it. Nestled in the cradle of rock and pine, tucked just far enough from the sea to be hidden from the shoreline, was a village. Not made of stone or timber like those in the south, but of immense tents, some the size of halls, stitched together from the hides of elk, bear, and mammoth. Long tree trunks had been carved and hammered to serve as support beams, angled in a conical shape to resist the weight of snow. Smoke curled from holes at the tops, rising lazily into the cold air. Crows circled above the village in great numbers, their cries echoing like sentries sounding in alarm. Harry turned to Jarl, the broad-shouldered wildling who had guided them since their meeting. "This is it." Jarl grinned. Ice Raven Village, my home. My father is chief here." They beached the boats on a strip of black sand where the cliffs receded. As the wildlings leapt into the icy shallows and hauled the boats ashore, Harry helped Lyanna down carefully. She clutched his arm for balance, still uneasy from the voyage. The first to greet them weren't warriors, but children. Bundles of fur with tiny hands and curious eyes, the children of the Ice Ravens ran toward the returning raiders with shrieks of joy. Some carried wooden clubs, others dragged toys made from driftwood. They stopped short when they saw Harry and Lyanna, tilting their heads as though examining mythical creatures from stories. One child with a red fox pelt hat pointed at Lyanna. "Is she a ghost?" Another giggled. "She's got hair like snow." Jarl shooed them away with a laugh. "Go on now, fetch your mothers." He led Harry and Lyanna through the outer edge of the village, where furs hung from wooden racks and smoked meats dangled above drying pits. Women emerged from the tents, joy lighting their faces as they ran to greet the returning men. Laughs, tears, and kisses filled the air, but not all shared in the joy. Some women stood alone, eyes searching the arriving boats, finding no familiar face. One woman dropped to her knees when she realized her son hadn't returned. Jarl's smile faded as he approached the large tent at the village's edge, a towering structure supported by carved pine beams. "My father's hall," he said. "Come." Inside, it was warm and smoky. A fire burned at the center pit, and seated near it was an older man, his face carved from stone and wind. His beard was streaked with gray, and scars crisscrossed his brow. He rose when he saw Jarl. "My son," he said, clasping his arm. Then his eyes moved to Harry and Lyanna. "These are your guests." Jarl nodded. "The one who killed Roose Bolton." The chief's gaze sharpened. He stepped forward and studied Harry as one might inspect a weapon. "That alone makes you a friend. You may stay. Both of you." "Thank you," Harry replied, bowing slightly. "But I hope you don't mind. I may suggest some changes." That earned a grunt. Outsiders always want to change what they don't understand. Harry left it at that, for now. They spent the day moving through the village. The stolen goods were unpacked: crates of wheat, barrels of wine, axes and boots and rope, all taken from northern settlements. The villagers were efficient and jubilant, but Harry's eyes noted more than celebration. The tents, even the largest ones, were poorly insulated. Snow crept in through the cracks, and the wind rattled the hide walls. Children coughed from cold air. The camp had no wall, no defense, not even a watchtower. And the location was perilous, hidden only by isolation. "We can build something better," Harry told Lyanna that night. "But they won't listen yet. They don't trust outsiders," she murmured, sitting beside him near a crackling fire. "Can you blame them?" "No," he said softly. "But I'll earn it." As the days passed, Harry made himself useful. He healed a child's frostbite using herbs he brought in his trunk, helped repair leaking tents with clever stitching charms, and hunted in the nearby woods, always careful to hide his magic. But Lyanna, she became the focus of unwanted attention. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Men stared, some openly, others through narrowed eyes. Her high-born looks, her clean skin, her grace, she was too different. Too desirable. She wasn't one of them, and they knew she wasn't Harry's wife. One evening, a wildling approached Harry with a grin. "You'll trade the girl. I've got a fine goat. Even fatter than her." Harry's jaw tightened. "She's not for trade." Another man, emboldened, offered him a sack of dried fish. For just one night. That night, Lyanna trembled as she sat beside Harry. "I can't stay here." He nodded. "We'll leave soon. Head north. Past even this place." "Where will we go?" "To the edge of the world," he said. "And then, if there's nothing beyond, we'll build something." They stayed 2 more weeks. Long enough to rest. Long enough to mourn the dead. Long enough to learn what they could of the ice ravens, who despite their ruggedness, were still people trying to survive in a world that had forgotten them. When they left, it was with little ceremony. Jarl met them at the edge of the village. "You're going into the mountains." Harry nodded. "Further north, maybe east, if the path allows." Jarl handed him a wrapped bundle. "Dried meat, furs, and bone knives. Gifts from my father. And from me." Harry took it. "Thank you." As they walked away, Lyanna pulled her cloak tighter. "Do you really think we'll find peace?" He looked back once at the village of smoke and tents. Then forward, into the white expanse. "If not," he said, "we'll make it." Chapter 16: A Dragon in the North. There are many things that made Lyanna stark shocked. In the 15 years she lived, a few had left lasting impressions. The death of her mother when she was still a child, the first time she stole Brandon's horse and fell trying to ride it across the frozen stream near Winterfell, the moment Prince Rhaegar Targaryen placed a crown of blue winter roses on her head at the tourney of Harrenhal, and more recently, the discovery that she was pregnant with Rhaegar's child. Then, of course, there was her near assault at the hands of wildlings. But what she saw now easily made it to her top 3 most shocking moments. A massive white dragon descended from the sky. It appeared from the pale clouds like a phantom, its wings slicing through the air in silence, only the roar of wind announcing its approach. The dragon landed before them, snow billowing around its gigantic claws as it touched the earth. It was enormous, larger than any warhorse, larger than a hall, with scales as white as snow, sleek and unblemished. Its wings folded with a graceful rustle, and its large, slitted eyes gleamed like polished ice. Lyanna gasped, stumbling a step backward. "What in the name of the old gods?" she whispered, instinctively pressing herself behind Harry. Harry stood calmly, as if he hadn't just been met by one of the most fearsome beasts known to man. He looked at the dragon with quiet fondness, no fear in his posture. "Lyanna," he said, turning slightly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, "this is my dragon. His name is Winter." Lyanna blinked. "You have a dragon?" Harry smiled. "Yes. He's been following us forever. Quietly. He always keeps an eye on me." Winter exhaled through his nostrils, and the warm steam from his breath wafted into the freezing air. Lyanna felt like her knees might buckle. The stories of dragons were just that, stories. Tales sung by bards and whispered by old crones around hearths. Everyone knew the dragons had died out with the last Targaryens during the Dance of the Dragons. And yet here stood a living legend. The dragon lowered its head slightly, its piercing gaze fixed on her. Harry nudged her gently forward. "Winter wants to meet you." "Meet me," she hissed. "It's a dragon." "He's more than that," Harry said. "He's intelligent. He understands us." Winter shifted again, flicking some of the snow from his wings as he adjusted his position. The dragon stared at Lyanna, tilting its massive head as if waiting for her to do something. Lyanna took a shaky step forward. Hi, Winter," she said awkwardly, raising a hand in the air. Then she added, in a whisper, "Don't eat me." Harry laughed behind her. "He won't. He will protect you." Winter gave a slow, deliberate nod, and the sight made Lyanna freeze in place. "He understood you," she said in disbelief. Harry nodded. "Of course, dragons are connected to their rider. But Winter, he's more than just a beast. He's seen worlds beyond this one. He understands fear, anger, even sorrow." Lyanna turned to look at him. "Where did you get him?" Harry hesitated. "That's a long story, one for another time." They stood in silence for a few moments, the snow falling gently around them, and Winter's breath steaming in the cold air. Then, Harry asked, "Would you like to fly with him?" Lyanna's mouth dropped open. "What? He can carry us both. He won't drop you, I promise." She looked at Winter, then back at Harry. "Is he safe?" "He's the safest place you could be." Winter lowered his massive body to the ground, wings splayed slightly for balance. A low, rumbling sound emerged from his chest, not a growl, but something softer. Harry climbed up first, expertly gripping the dragon's spine ridges. He held a hand down to her. Lyanna hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. The moment she settled behind him, Winter lifted into the air. The earth fell away beneath them as the wind rushed past, and Lyanna clutched Harry tightly. The sensation of flight, true flight, was like nothing she had ever known. The cold air slapped her cheeks, the snowflakes stung her eyes, but the feeling of freedom was overwhelming. They flew high above the nearby glacier lake, over forests, mountains, and frozen rivers. From this height, Lyanna could see the world stretched out below her like a map. She let out a laugh, wild and free. And Harry, seated in front of her, smiled. When Winter landed again, it was in a clearing near the edge of a glacier, far beyond the reach of any wildling settlement. The air was sharp, the silence profound. Lyanna stumbled slightly as she dismounted, her legs weak from the thrill of flight. "You're insane," she said breathlessly. "Do you know that?" Harry grinned. "You liked it." She did, but she wasn't about to admit it. Winter moved behind them, curling into a resting position, wings tucked close. Lyanna looked at Harry, still trying to piece everything together. "Who are you, really?" she asked. Harry looked up at the sky. The clouds were parting, revealing the pale blue of the northern morning. "A boy who grew up in a cupboard," he said softly. "A boy who lived. A man now trying to live on his own terms." She furrowed her brow. "A cupboard," he chuckled. "Another story for another time." They made camp there, with Harry conjuring a small magical shelter, nothing that would arouse suspicion, just a windbreak and heat charms for their blankets. Lyanna sat beside him, the silence between them no longer awkward. "I'm not sure where we go from here," she admitted. Harry looked toward the north. "Further, until we find a place where no one can find us." "And what then?" He turned to her, his voice steady. "Then we build something new." And far above, circling silently like a guardian in the sky, the white dragon Winter watched them, unseen by any soul save his bonded. The morning air was biting cold, crisp with the scent of pine and the faint tang of frost. Lyanna Stark had begun to grow used to waking among snow-laden boughs and canvas covers, but what greeted her that morning made her sit up with such suddenness that the blanket slid off her shoulders. There, not far from their makeshift camp, stood the dragon. Winter. Massive, pristine, wild. The dragon's white scales shimmered like fresh snow in the rising sunlight. Its long wings folded gently to its sides as it crouched over its meal, a recently slain mammoth. Its tusks were broken, its thick woolen hide ripped open, and steam rose from the open carcass as Winter tore into it with deliberate satisfaction, like a cat that had just found a fat mouse. Lyanna swallowed hard. "By the old gods," she whispered. "He caught a mammoth." "Yes," Harry said cheerfully from beside her, already crouching down to light a small magical fire near the canvas lean-to they'd raised the night before. He bring down one last week. They're surprisingly fast for their size. Took me a while to believe the mammoth exist here. Yes, mammoths are near extinct in the Westeros, Lyanna said, incredulous. Only ever read about them in old Maester Willen's scrolls. There's some mammoth beyond the wall, Harry said, standing again and brushing the snow from his cloak. Still, an easy hunt. He's been practicing. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I feel like I'm living in a fever dream. Harry smiled and reached into his cloak pocket, pulling out what looked like a tiny wooden box. What's that? She asked, watching him curiously. Instead of replying, Harry tapped the box with his wand and muttered, Engorgio. Before her eyes, the box expanded into a large, intricately carved trunk, the kind that looked like it belonged in a nobleman's solar. Lyanna stepped closer, astonished. Is that a trunk? Indeed, Harry said with a grin, kneeling before it. He flipped open the lid and began to rummage inside. Out came bundles of dried vegetables wrapped in enchanted linen, spice jars with labels in a flowing script she didn't recognize, polished cooking pots that gleamed like silver, and thick slabs of cured meat still glistening with salt. Where did you get all this? Harry shrugged, setting a pot over the fire. Collected them, bought them, traded for some in White Harbor. Others I brought from, well, far away. You're rich, she said, watching him with narrowed eyes. You're more than a wandering swordsman, aren't you? I never claimed to be just a swordsman, he replied with a wink. But then how do you know cooking? Didn't you had servants? He tossed a handful of chopped onion into the pot, and a warm, savory smell immediately began to rise. Because I like it, food is one of the few ways to bring comfort in a wild place. When she tasted the stew he prepared, thick with meat, vegetables, and spices that danced on her tongue, Lyanna couldn't help but groan in delight. Gods, this is better than anything I've had at Winterfell. High praise from the daughter of a warden of the north, Harry said, offering her a slice of crusty bread he had baked over the coals the night before. She nodded, licking her fingers. Better than the royal kitchens, I'd wager. Their moment of calm was interrupted by memory. Lyanna looked toward the woods, toward where the Ice Raven tribe had once stood. They told us to stay, she murmured. Said the rest of the free folk wouldn't be so kind. I remember, Harry replied, stirring the pot. But kindness doesn't build a future. I want to offer something else. And what is that? She asked. A home, he said simply. A place where wildlings, or free folk, can live without fear. Where they can work, grow, trade. A real settlement, with walls, with order. Lyanna studied him as he stood and poured her a bowl. Do you really believe that's possible? Harry handed her the bowl and crouched beside her, gazing out into the white wilderness. I have a dragon, I have gold, I have magic, and I have you. That made her cheeks color, and she looked away. But more than that, Harry continued, I have a dream. If we settle near the eastern edge of this land, we can build a port. Not for the Seven Kingdoms, they'll never trade with the wildlings, but for Essos. The free cities don't care where the goods come from if the gold is real. Lyanna frowned. You'd risk your life for that. I already have. Later that day, they took flight on Winter's back, soaring high above the frozen forests and ice-covered valleys. The land below was white and ancient, dotted with craggy cliffs, dark lakes, and the occasional herd of elk fleeing at the dragon's shadow. For 3 days they flew, stopping only to sleep in shallow caves or among thick evergreens. Harry used his magical compass to orient himself while Lyanna kept watch with sharp northern eyes. Then, at last, Harry saw it. The river. It was a grand and ancient artery of water, winding through the snowfields like a silver snake. The river forked sharply into 2 distinct branches, creating a natural wedge of land protected on 3 sides. The perfect spot. There, he said, pointing. That's where we'll build. Lyanna squinted. That's the Antler River. I read about it once, only a few ever dared live near it. Floods, harsh winters, and legends. Harry grinned. I like legends. As winter descended toward a wide, flat section of the land between the forks, Harry looked thoughtful. What should we call it? You're asking me, she said, stunned. He nodded. It's our home now, our dream. She thought for a moment. Something northern, something that speaks of survival. I was thinking, Harry hesitated, then smiled. Narnia. She blinked. Narnia, a place from a story I read as a child. A land of magic, snow, talking animals, and endless wonder. A place where even the most unlikely people can become kings and queens. Lyanna let the name roll off her tongue. Narnia. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled, genuinely, freely, with hope. Narnia, she repeated. Then let's build it. Harry nodded, placing a hand over hers. Together. And high above them, winter roared, a cry that echoed across the vast white wilderness, as if the dragon himself was claiming the land. Their future, their Narnia. To be continued.